you doing? Welcome to Pekasotmau Youth Online. This is Youth Split, a show that we get to tackle matters concerning the youth, be it spirituality, career, art, business, and now our only hope is that by the end of every show you be inspired, educated, or entertained. My name is Sharon Jogu. Today we have a very interesting topic for you. We are talking about self-harm as a disorder in the mental health department, if I can say that. And I am joined by a guest, a very interesting guest that I got to meet today, Yvonne.
Thank you, Shell. My name is Yvonne Chinyari. I'm a crafts teacher, a psychologist by training, but I ventured into expressive art. So instead of using talk therapy, I explore art as a medium of therapy, and it's good to be on your show. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, you're welcome. Let's start with understanding what self-harm is.
To demystify self-harm, it's not a disorder. It's more of an emotional reaction, like how we respond to being sad. One can either cry or go and sit by themselves. So it's the same case with self-harm. It's just it's an outlet for emotions, like a release outlet. So how we can, in brief, like how we can describe self-harm, it's an emotional release outlet where we get rid of, or we try to get rid of, destructive emotions. I purposefully choose not to call them positive or negative emotions because an emotion is an emotion. There's no need to label it positive, because the minute you label it positive, then it means we are constantly trying to feel that. And the minute you label it negative, then we are constantly trying to not feel a particular way, like you shouldn't feel angry. But the reality is, anger is also an emotion. It's a good emotion if channeled the right way. So self-harm is an outlet for destructive emotions, and it's done in a secretive manner. So the entire space for self-harm is more it's done in a secretive manner, because the person harming themselves, they feel that they should be ashamed, or they feel ashamed of how they're feeling and what they're doing. So the entire space is surrounded by guilt, shame, and judgment.
Right. And just before we go to shame, let's understand most people may think that they are trying to commit suicide, which is not true when it comes to self harm. Yeah.
So there are very many myths surrounding self-harm. The first one, it's a disorder. It's not, it's just an emotional reaction to something. And the next is like when one self-harms, they're trying to commit suicide. But in reality, they don't want to commit suicide. They just want to be seen. They want to feel alive. So that goes to the question why one is self-harming. People self-harm for different reasons, but the major one is the need to feel, the need to actually feel, because as you're going through life, you get scarred by so many things. There are very many things that can cause pain. And when you build tolerance to pain, one of the reactions that one might adopt is numbing. So when you numb an emotion, you don't even realize you're feeling a particular way. So you quiet. Somebody tells you that they don't get angry. Anger is just a superficial emotion to them. So once they build tolerance to numbing pain, then there's not that need to actually feel pain. For example, when you lose a loved one and you can't even express that emotion. So it goes back to the need to actually feel. So that might be one of the reason one might start numbing, self-harming. And the other one is to just dissociate pain. Emotions are very tricky to navigate through because we can't see them, we can't touch them. But physical pain is easier to deal with because I can say I have a cut on my arm or on my knee. So it's easier to deal with that pain. So that could be another reason why I start self-harming, as a way to alter my state of mind from emotional to physical. So to go back to your answer to your question is, it's not a suicide attempt. It's actually an attempt to be seen. You see, with suicide, it's more of, it's my last resort. This is one way I can deal with the pain that I'm feeling. But with self harm, it's I want to be seen. So it's also not a call for attention, because another myth surrounding it is, I want your attention. It might start off as a call for attention, but we'll say that it's done in a secretive manner. So when I cut myself, then I'll put on a long sleeved and hide it. So I'm not calling for your attention. I'm just reacting to the emotions that I feel, the stressors in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's unpack disassociation. Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. In school can be a very tricky place to be in.
Yeah,
Can be a very positive place, but can also be a place as a stress. It can be a stress trigger. So, for example, a child is being bullied in school, and they're being pushed down on the floor, or their snacks are being taken, or they're being called words. So it's easier to deal with a physical pain, like when I push somebody down, they might hurt their knee. It's much easier to deal with a physical pain, one that I can see, that I've hurt my knee, my arm, rather than dealing with the emotional pain of calling you a loser, calling you stupid, because I can't see, these are all mental. You see, we are so socialized to we don't like abstract things. We want concrete things. Even when, as we are developing ideas, we want it to come into fruition. Immediately we think about it. But if something is abstract, like something that is in your head, mental, it's very difficult to come around it. But if I'm dealing with a broken knee, all my attention is there. So I dissociate, or I alter my state of mind to not think of my emotional distress and just focus on, this is what is paining me. This is the cause of my pain, and not those words that were spoken about me, or the pain of losing a loved one. It's not something physical. So it's easier to deal with, like this microphone. It's easier to blame the microphone is not working, rather than dealing with emotional and mental stress.
Right. Um, let's talk about what I picked on most while I was preparing for this specific topic is that most people said that they want to be in control. What is that?
I wouldn't say, because I wouldn't want to generalize for everybody. Control is something we are all trying to master as human beings. We want to be in control of where we live, what we do, how the weather is. We plan what clothes to wear, and when the weather changes, then we get angry because we've lost control of a particular thing that we wanted. So, from where I stand, I think control is very elusive, as trying to gain control each and every time. Then in the process we lose control of living, because we're always trying to get that thing, the next thing. And in the process of getting the next thing, we don't actually realize we have so much right now. So we lose on very small but beautiful moments, such as a child smiling at you because you want to be in control. You don't see the smile. Because you want to be in control, you don't feel the hug, or you don't hear the other person because they're not listening to what you're saying. A good example is our parents. At times, they want us to do what they want, like we have to follow in the steps that they feel are right, and they don't, because of the need to control how we live our lives. They miss out on some of the ways we tell them. Like, for example, one doesn't like chemistry, but they like art. But because the parent wants to be in control, they miss out on the girl singing in the shower, or they miss out on the boy drumming using spoons, because we are so set on achieving that goal, and we lose focus on the day-to-day living. So we miss out on gratitude, we miss out on contentment as we strive for that big thing, the next thing.
Right. Now let's talk about self-harm as an addiction, because I think I saw someone who had several cuts on their hand, and also they also spoke of having cuts on their thighs. How does someone get to that point of cutting and cutting and cutting?
To begin with, it's very important to shed light on various ways people self-harm. I feel like there are various ways of self-harming. For example, there is drunk driving, there is drug misuse, and then there is irresponsible sexual behavior. These behaviors, there's so much conversation going around them that there's no shame or guilt or judgment that hangs around them. But for someone who self harms by cutting their arms, their knees, or their thighs, there's so much shame because we feel like they're hurting themselves deliberately, which they are, but it's more of a reaction to something they're feeling. So, for example, how one can self harm by drunk driving is you have a few bottles with a friend and you're not fit to drive because even as you drive you're putting yourself in danger and also other road users, so not just you, because it may come from a selfish point of view but it's not. So it's as you drive, as when you're drunk, you're not only putting yourself at risk but also the other person, or irresponsible sexual behaviors. You're not able to deal with the fact that it's okay to be alone at times. So we are constantly trying to validate ourselves through other people. So we keep on jumping from one relationship to the other, which is in the end, it's a vicious cycle. No one will validate you to how you want to. Unless you do it yourself, you'll always be jumping from one relationship to another. So these certain behaviors have more of been normalized because there's so much conversation going around them. But somebody who cuts themselves or pulls their hair or burns themselves, there's so much shame and guilt surrounding those behaviors that it becomes a very secretive re- um, behavioral response to emotions. So, like just like building tolerance by taking alcohol, we start with one bottle
Yeah.
or social drinking, and then we progressively go to a point of where we can't do without alcohol.
Yeah.
It's the same case with somebody who self harms, for example, by cutting themselves. Um, there's a multiple triggers that can cause one to self harm. So it starts very small, and I cut myself, kidogo. And then the next time the same trigger happens, I want to feel the exact way I felt when I started self cutting. So I go deeper and not just one cut, I do two so that I can achieve the same effect. So with time, I build tolerance to pain that is caused by self harming. And within no time, you can be addicted to cutting because for them, that's a major coping strategy. They don't feel like they have another way of coping or dealing with the emotional stress. So it becomes an addictive behavior. They don't intend for it to be addictive, but it's just the way they deal with their stress.
Right. You had mentioned about shame. Um, the thing with anything, when you're trying to get relief from something that it's outside you, it's a high for a few minutes, then it dies off, and you're left with shame. Yeah. Let's unpack that.
Um, you see, it goes back to how we've labeled emotions. We've labeled some emotions to be positive and some to be negative. So there are those emotions we are constantly trying to achieve, being positive, being happy, content, excited. But then we label these other emotions like being sad, being angry to be negative. So we are constantly trying to avoid them. But the reality of life is that you'll have all these emotions. A good example is in a day, you might feel happy, sad, frustrated, depressed. But the reality is, an emotion is an emotion. There is no need to label it as positive or negative. So when we label an emotion as negative, then we've already put a bias to it. So we feel ashamed, or when we tell children, don't be angry, children don't get angry. So they grow up thinking that it's wrong to get angry. And when they feel angry, then there's, mom said I shouldn't feel angry. So I shouldn't be feeling this. There's already shame around it of how I'm feeling. So when I start self harming, there's more shame to it because I'm not only ashamed of how I feel, I'm ashamed of how I'm dealing with how I'm feeling. So it's building on shame on top of shame.
Now let's go to practical ways where I can stop as a person who self harms. How do I stop? all this?
So the first step to stopping self harm will be to acknowledge your humanity, your feelings, and not try to sweep them under the rug. Because the minute you sweep them under the rug, then you're not dealing with them; you're just hiding. And the more you hide, the more it builds up. So the first step that I'll suggest to somebody who is self-harming is just acknowledge you're struggling. We're all struggling with something. And the minute you acknowledge that, then you're also acknowledging your humanity, that I feel and it's okay to feel. And then the next step is, if you're an adult, you can change your situation or your environment. If it's the work environment that's making you self-harm, so it's a trigger, then it's good to start thinking about changing jobs or starting something else for yourself. If you're a child who's self harming, then it's important that you try to talk to your parents about it. But it's also important for parents to open those channels of communication where a child can approach you and tell you how they're feeling without feeling that you'll punish them or tell them not to feel that way, because they're children of God. And then the third thing is to find small things that give you a sense of accomplishment. A good example is brushing your teeth. It looks very trivial, but it's actually something that can make you feel accomplished, that you've done something good for yourself. You don't have a bad odor, and or making your bed or clearing the table, your workspace. So finding very small things that when you do, you get a sense of accomplishment, and by doing them, the very small things, then they build up into something that can become big. And then the other thing that I'd suggest is finding hobbies or something that you're good at. Could be music, could be drawing, could be cooking, something that makes you feel that I am good at this and I can be good at it even much better. And then another thing will be to writing down your thoughts, like journaling. It's I suggest, like I really recommend writing them down, because by writing them down, then you're able to transfer that energy and you're able to observe your thoughts. Other ways you can do is setting achievable goals, because when someone self harms, it's maybe because of they feel like they're not achieving what they're set out to do. And when you don't achieve that particular one thing that you wanted to do, then you feel like you're a loser. You've not done enough. You're not doing enough. But if you're able to set small but achievable goals in a day, then you're able to achieve that big goal. So, one thing I recommend is having a to do list. And as you check it off at the end of the day, you feel, I actually showed up today for me. So, it's on those. And not pushing too hard. It's okay to have breaks. You're not lazy. You're not um, being dependent. You're just taking a break, and it's okay to have a break. Another way I'd suggest is just talk to a friend, be open about it. But for you to be open about it, you have to be very intentional with the relationships you form. Why am I being your friend? Is it for material gain, for status? Like, be very intentional with the relationships you form, because those relationships will be a bedrock of support when you desperately need them. So even as you set out to make friends, it's good to be intentional about it. Um,
Right. Those are very good point. And actually, as a person who has dealt with mental health disorder, the thing I can highly suggest is always talking to someone.
mhm.
I think that's when you learn that you're not alone in this.
True.
Yeah, and there is healing in that.
Very
Um, how do I support someone who is self harming?
Um, there are many ways you can support them, but I think the top to support somebody is just creating a mental and an emotional space that is warm. There's no judgment to it. There's no shame around it. So when I'm disclosing to you that I'm self-harming, I know I'm coming in a safe space. So the best way that I can recommend to support somebody who is self-harming is be a support system, a genuine support system. Show empathy, be kind to them, and just be a loving person. I know it can be hard because of the daily activities that you have to do. We're always busy. If you call somebody, they're always busy doing something. But actually taking a break and stopping what you're doing and listening to this person, not hearing them, but listening to them, is probably the best way you can help this person. Other ways that we can step up as a support system or as caregivers to support our loved ones will be to educate ourselves on self-harm, not just take up the myths that we've heard about it and think that that's why they're harming themselves, is to actually educate ourselves. What is self-harm? Why does one self-harms? And how can I respond to it appropriately? Not to call them out. At times we shed, so we put them on a spotlight, and it makes them feel so bad, so bad, because why are you putting me on a platter for everyone to know that I'm struggling with somebody? But it's to educate ourselves on how we can respond to it appropriately. Another way is to also go for therapy. I forgot to mention another way of stopping self harm on a personal level is going for therapy and taking medication if you're on medication. So, if you're on antidepressant or antipsychotic drugs, it's important to take the medication and not feel like uh, it's wrong to take them. It's okay to take them. So, it's also for us as caregivers, it's important we go for therapy and learn on how we can best support these children, these sisters, brothers, whoever is self-harming and is within our space. It's important for us also to go for therapy so that you're not also taking up the burden of somebody else, because it becomes a baggage to us.
Yeah, and just to stress a point on support and listening, you said
Oh yeah,
listening.
listening.
Yeah. I was listening to some men on IG. They were talking about healing from porn. Um, and someone said, when I come and when someone approaches me, do I start by asking them, "What are you watching?" Like, why can't I just sit and hear their story so that I can learn where they are coming from?
True.
Yeah.
I think we learn more by listening than talking.
Yeah.
Because when I'm talking, I'm trying to shove my ideas or impose my ideas onto you. So I don't listen to what you're telling me. Like, not just listening to verbal communication, but also listening to their body language. If somebody doesn't want to look you in the eyes, it's important to go in a space that allows them to feel they're free, because maybe it's the space that's the problem and they're communicating that by not saying. So it's important to listen and not talk. But when you start talking by sharing your ideas or suggesting ideas, then talk in a manner or with a tone that is very kind. At times it's not what you say, it's how you say it. I don't know if you've experienced that. Somebody is coming from a good place, they're well intended, but how they say it makes you feel like there's a problem between us, and there's no problem. So it's being very watchful with our tones, and then maintaining our attitudes. After I've disclosed to you, do you now change how you, like, your attitudes, your viewpoints from me? Do you start avoiding me to keep attending you know we respond. It's funny how we tell, like, we respond after somebody shares something. Unfortunately, it's funny, but it's unfortunate. When somebody discloses, like, our perception about them changes. So it's also when somebody discloses, it's important that we maintain our attitudes. We don't talk about them. The covert language of gossiping, I think, is calling somebody and saying, we need to pray for somebody. We don't mention them. We just say we need to pray for somebody, or we need to pray against something that is happening. That's a covert language for gossiping.
Wow. Yeah.
We're not mentioning names, but we're actually talking about them. Or in a family gathering, we say, tunaombea mapepo itoke. That person already feels you're shedding light on me too much. So when somebody discloses, be very watchful of your tone, be very watchful of your attitudes after, before, during, and after disclosure. Don't make them feel as though they unburden themselves to you and now they're a burden to you by avoiding their calls.
Right.
Nitakupigia, nitakupigia.
Yeah.
We don't call back.
Okay. Now, talk to someone who is currently struggling with self-harm.
I think the best thing that you can do for yourself is actually show up for yourself. Instead of waiting for somebody else to show for you, find a distraction. When the urge to self-harm comes, how can you help yourself at that particular time? There's this approach or a method that I saw about self-harming. So when the urge to self-harm comes, you apply it's called the 5-minute rule. It involves, if I feel like cutting myself, I just wait for 5 minutes. The 5 minutes lapses, I wait for another 5 minutes until the urge goes away. So it's important that you find distractive ways, like to distract yourself. And this is not a negative thing, because I think distraction can be a positive or the first step to stopping self-harm. How can you help yourself at that particular time?
Right.
Before I call you, Shell, how can I help myself? So it's finding destructive approaches that you can help yourself. It can be the 5-minute rule or rubbing ice on your hand when the urge is really there, because it gives the same effect as cutting. Or even just singing out aloud or yelling, as long as you're not interrupting other people. So you're just finding a space that you can let out those destructive emotions. And the topmost will be for you to actually learn to pray for yourself, because the Bible tells us that in 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 17 that cast all your burdens unto God, for He cares. He actually cares for you. So you can go to Him and tell Him how you feel, and let it soak it up. Let His love soak you up, without feeling that you're not good enough, because we're all not good enough, but He still loved us the way we are. So the first will be to acknowledge your struggles and then work around them. Find destructive approaches or interventions to stopping the urge, and then just pray about it. Right. Pray about it and do something as well, not just pray and wait. You have to pray and do something.
Thank you so much, Yvonne, for coming to Youth School today. That's it, guys, for today. Until next Friday.